What is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and this is my official ranking of the entire MCU franchise. There's 22 films in this franchise with the release of Avengers Endgame this past weekend, which has been just dominating the box office. Before I get into this ranking video, make sure you guys subscribe to my channel right below for more content just like this. Starting off with number 22, which is Thor: The Dark World. Thor: The Dark World is a very forgettable movie for me. I haven't seen it in years, and when I did watch it, I found it to just be mediocre at best. Natalie Portman really phones it in the entire time during this movie. It has one of the worst villains in the whole MCU, if not the worst villain, and it just is not memorable whatsoever. And to tell you the truth, I really don't remember a lot of it other than the fact that most of the battle happens between Asgard and Earth. Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster, gets this ether into her. Yeah, this movie was pretty low on the totem pole for comic book movies in my opinion, but it's still a decent film. It's not terrible, it's still watchable, but nowhere is it near the top for the MCU. That's why it is at the absolute bottom. Number 21. Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2, I have a love-hate relationship with this film. I like aspects of it. I like how they incorporate that Tony Stark ego even more in this film. You get the really nice relationship between him and Pepper. You get Black Widow in this film, which we get to see for the first time in the MCU, who would become a staple in the MCU franchise. But there are a lot of problems with this film. Sam Rockwell's character is so corny, over the top. Then you have a villain, again, who's pretty forgettable, but not as bad as Malekith from Thor: The Dark World. And to me, I just felt like this movie could have done a lot more for me, and that is why it is number 21. Number 20, Thor. Do you get it? The first two Thor movies, I wasn't a huge fan of. Thor is a movie that's not bad. It's pretty good. However, it has a lot of flaws. One of those flaws being they really don't know how to use the character of Thor. The Thor we have now is a lot different from the original Thor that we had. Tom Hiddleston as Loki is really nice in here, and I like the dynamic between those two. Anthony Hopkins as well playing Odin was a really nice touch. Rene Russo is in this film. But my biggest problem with this movie is this movie, again, is forgettable. It's one of those films where they do things outside of the spectrum and they take risks, but at the same time, the risks don't really pay off at the end of this film. And Thor is one of those movies that it's not bad. It's been a long time since I've watched it, and I don't remember too much about it, so that just means that it is kind of forgettable, and that is why it makes my list at the bottom. Number 19, The Incredible Hulk. It has been a long time since I've seen The Incredible Hulk, and Edward Norton did a great job bringing this character to life on the big screen. Biggest problem with this film, though, is Abomination. I feel like they could have done a lot more with this villain. They could have made him more menacing and more terrifying. However, they kind of made him a smaller package in this film. And I also really did not like Liv Tyler that much in this film. I kind of felt like her performance was a little wooden at times, and I felt like the relationship between her and Edward Norton was just a little off. There was something there that I just didn't like. But overall, Incredible Hulk is not a terrible MCU film. I know a lot of people put it at their bottom. It is pretty forgettable, but it's decent. It's not a bad film. I could definitely watch it and have fun with it nowadays. And the Hulk that we get now is a lot different from that Hulk, which was more menacing and more predominant of a figure as opposed to the one that we get now, which is more for laughs. Number 18, Captain America: The First Avenger. The First Avenger for me is one of those movies that had to set up the scope of the Avengers and leading up to 2012. I mean, this was the movie that everyone was looking forward to because this is Captain America's story. Captain America is my favorite MCU character. I'm not wearing a Captain America shirt right now. I'm wearing my Spider-Man shirt. I love the story of Steve Rogers. I love how he started off as a scrawny kid from Brooklyn who would get in fights with people, and he was always standing up for other people, as well as he wasn't afraid to take a beating, and then he becomes a super soldier, and he's still humble. And even though he has superpowers and he's different, he still is emotional. He still has love, and he still, you know, builds on those friendships that he has. So to me, Captain America: The First Avenger is a solid film. However, it is just one of those films that kind of gets lost in all of the shining galore that is the MCU. Number 17 and on for me are films that I absolutely love, and these are films that I could watch these movies over and over again because of how much I enjoyed them. Number 17 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is a movie that came out on the heels of Avengers Infinity War, which is massive. This movie gives you a nice cleansing palate. However, the problem with this movie is there's really no real stakes because everything that this movie is before Avengers Infinity War. Now, you get a nice Evangeline Lilly Wasp in here, and you get Paul Rudd, who's great. And also, Michael Pena in this film is absolutely amazing, like usual. But my biggest problem with Ant-Man and the Wasp is the villain. The villain, the Ghost, is just a forgettable villain, one of the whiniest and one of the biggest loser villains that the MCU has had. I really could not stand her character at all, and there was no sympathy for it. Coming from two movies in Black Panther, where Killmonger was an amazing villain, and then Thanos, who is the best villain we've seen in the MCU, to a villain that just whines and cries when she doesn't get her way. To me, I just didn't really appreciate it that much, and I really didn't like it. And for that, that is why Ant-Man and the Wasp falls at number 17 for me on the list. Moving on, number 16, the 2019 film Captain Marvel. I enjoyed Captain Marvel. I think it's a lot of fun. Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson have fantastic chemistry on screen. You get some really cool moments in this film. You get those 90s nostalgia throwbacks to Blockbuster and Radio Shack, which is all really nice. But my biggest problem with this film is Brie Larson's performance as Captain Marvel. Now, Brie Larson is a fantastic actress. Go watch Room, and you'll see how good of an actress she really is. But my biggest problem is everything she presents and delivers in this film is so wooden. And I understand that she's supposed to hide her emotions. Jude Law's character tells her all the time, like, hide your emotions because people will use those emotions to their advantage. But my biggest problem is even when there are moments in this film where she should have emotion and should show that and implement it, she's so wooden. She comes across just so fake. I don't buy into her performance, and that's one of my biggest problems. However, I do like the twist that they have in this film. I'm not going to give anything away because it is still fairly recent. Overall, Captain Marvel is a fun space epic type of movie that gave me those space moments that I wanted. My wife would have this at her number 2 or even maybe number 1, but for me, I have to put this in the bottom of the list because for me, Brie Larson just did not deliver the movie that I was hoping. It's just a cut, copy, and paste formulaic superhero origin story. Number 15, Avengers Age of Ultron. Avengers Age of Ultron came out when I was on my mission, so I didn't really get to see it in the theater, which I would have loved this movie if I would have gotten a chance to see it in the theater. But coming back from my mission and watching this film, there are problems with this movie. Number 1, I do like the characters in this film. I like that, you have Scarlet Witch introduced, Quicksilver, who dies really quick, so he's okay, I guess. But then you get a character in Ultron who is a very good villain in the comic books, who is a menacing and frightful villain who actually presents real stakes in the comic book. However, in this movie, he presents zero stakes. Ultron was used in such a way that I kind of felt like it was a disservice to the character of Ultron. James Spader is fantastic. I wish we would have gotten to see Ultron a little bit more in his full glory. Other than that, I do like the little moments in between. You have all the Avengers trying to lift up Mjolnir, which was a lot of fun seeing that. You get some really good character interactions. You get a nice arc of a romance between Black Widow and Bruce Banner, which I felt was very natural, and I really liked that. And you get to see Hawkeye and his family, and you get to see a family type of setting for the Avengers. For me, this movie just falls flat on its face. The villain could have been a lot better, and there are problems. There are some big plot holes in this film that, to me, just make this movie lower on my list as I watch it each and every time. But I still have fun with it. It's still one of those movies that I could pop in and just watch easily. And I do feel like it's a little underrated. I know a lot of people don't like it. They put it like way in the bottom, but for me, I do like this film, but it's just not amazing. Number 14, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I actually really enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I just watched it this past weekend with my wife again. I love the story between a father and son. I like that element in this film, which I think is really nice because we haven't seen something like that in a superhero film ever. So to see something like that was just refreshing and nice. However, there are problems. There's not a lot of action in this film, which a lot of people complain about. Some of the jokes are fantastic. Some of the jokes fall a little flat. Kurt Russell could have been utilized a lot better as Ego. You have such an iconic actor in Kurt Russell, and I feel like he was underused a little bit, as well as the relationship between Nebula and Gamora. I felt like they did a really good job with that. However, there were times where it just kind of felt like forced a little bit onto the screen. However, this is a fantastic film. I enjoy it, and I think it's a lot of fun. The soundtrack is great, as usual, for Guardians of the Galaxy films. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next with the Guardians of the Galaxy, with James Gunn coming back to direct. Number 13, Doctor Strange. This is another one my wife would put probably in her top 3 discussion. Maybe number 2, maybe number 1, I don't know. But to me, Doctor Strange is a good film. It's solid. My biggest problem with this movie is, again, it's formulaic. Very formulaic to every other origin story we have seen prior. There's really no stakes. Mads Mikkelsen does the best job he can as the villain. However, his villain is pretty forgettable, to be quite honest. Dormammu, really cool. I like that element that they use, that little twist, to use the time stone to go back in time 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, and Dormammu keeps getting frustrated, so it's just one continuous time loop. I do like that. I love the sorcery element inside the MCU. That's really cool. There's all that there. Benedict Cumberbatch does a fantastic job playing Stephen Strange, but again, my problem is it's formulaic in nature, and it brought really no true stakes to the MCU as a whole. Number 12, Iron Man 3. This movie, it gets a lot of hate, and one of the reasons is because of the Mandarin twist. Now, I'm not a big fan of that twist either, and for me, that's one of the reasons why this movie is number 12 on my list. However, one of the biggest things I love about this film is I love that Shane Black really made this film his own. There are a lot of things in this film that just scream Shane Black, and I love a lot of the direction of this movie. I do like the character that Guy Pearce plays, even though he's a little kooky at times and not truly a real threat, but I do like his character. I like that you get more of a dynamic in the relationship between Pepper and Tony, which is really nice to see. You get those character moments. You get Tony dealing with PTSD from the Avengers, which I really liked because that's a different element we haven't seen in one of these MCU films in the past. So there are a lot of things to love here. The humor's great. It lands. Jon Favreau is fantastic in this movie. He's one of the highlights for me. But again, I think, the Mandarin twist is a problem, as well as some story elements just don't make sense. Some things are kind of just forgotten, like Pepper having, the fire powers or whatever the powers are. It's really weird. I don't really know how to describe it per se. But she never has them again after that. They never really go into detail of why she doesn't have them or how she got rid of them in any of the future movies. So I feel like this one kind of gets kicked under the rug a little bit, but still a solid movie. I still have a lot of fun with it, and I'll definitely put it in and watch it for sure. Number 11, Spider-Man Homecoming. Wow, is this the Spider-Man movie that we have long awaited for? I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man we have seen, and he just represents Spider-Man in such a way where he looks like a high schooler, he looks the part, he performs the part, and I just really I love this movie. I love what they do with the dynamic between Peter trying to impress Tony and wanting his approval, which is really nice because Peter doesn't really have that fatherly figure, so he looks at Iron Man, Tony Stark, as that fatherly figure, which is really cool. You get a really nice, really hot Aunt May in this film, which who would have ever thought we'd get a hot Aunt May? I didn't. You also get a really good villain in the Vulture, played by Michael Keaton. I think Michael Keaton does a fantastic job honing this in, and I think that the stakes are truly there. And this movie feels very small-scaled, even though it's so big. It feels small, and that's what I like about this film. It feels like it stands on its own in the MCU. And for me, Spider-Man Homecoming is one of the best films in the MCU, but it's still at number 11 because the top 10 I love even more than Spider-Man Homecoming. So now we get into the top 10, but before I get to the top 10, I want to hear your guys' thoughts below. What is your ranking? List it down below in the comments section. Top 10, these are 10 films that I absolutely love, that I would watch multiple times in a year. And it's really hard to pick these movies because there's so many good ones, like Spider-Man Homecoming. I love that film. Iron Man 3, I love that film. But I had to be realistic, and I had to pick movies that I would watch over and over again if I had the option. And these are just movies that I personally absolutely adore. Number 10, Iron Man. I love Iron Man. This is the movie that started the whole MCU. That's why it makes Avengers Endgame that much more special. It makes Iron Man as a character that much more special, and it makes this whole 22 film, 11-year period that much more special. Iron Man was a hit when it came out, and it should be. You get a fantastic portrayal of Iron Man by Robert Downey Jr., who I think is just the highlight, and he's really the godfather of the MCU. A really solid performance by Jeff Bridges, who I still feel like he was forced a little bit into the villain role in this film, but you do get a really nice upbringing into the MCU. There is a lot of world building here. There are moments where you feel like this is something special. and this is something that could really branch out and become something big, and it really did. And I just really appreciate Iron Man. It's got the laughs, it's got the humor, it's got the heart, it's got the action. Iron Man, if you have not seen the first Iron Man, the first movie in the MCU officially, you need to watch it because it is a fantastic film. Number 9, Ant-Man. Man, do I love Ant-Man. Paul Rudd, when he was casted as Ant-Man, I thought this is going to either go one of two ways. This is going to be really dumb for the MCU, or this is going to be really smart for the MCU, and I'm so happy to say that it was really smart for the MCU to have Ant-Man as Paul Rudd. He brought so much to this role. He brought the humor element of it. He also brought a lot of heart in this film. You get to see him being a dad, him wanting a better life for his daughter Cassie, and this is a heist film within the MCU, which I think is so refreshing and so nice. You get Michael Douglas, who does a fantastic job as Hank Pym, Evangeline Lilly, again, playing Hope. Later on, she would become the Wasp. So there are some really nice things about this film. One of the worst things, however, in this film is the villain. I did not like Yellow Jacket whatsoever as the villain. I felt like he was just kind of a throwaway villain, but I did like some of the action sequences, especially the scene where they're fighting, Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man are fighting within Cassie's room, and you get the really awesome moment with Tom the Train. So Ant-Man is a fantastic film, and it is number 9. Number 8, Wakanda Forever, Black Panther. Black Panther, when this movie came out, I was looking so forward to this film. It is a cultural celebrated film. It did get nominated for Best Picture, which I wasn't a fan of, but it is a very good comic book film. It is fantastic. Chadwick Boseman comes back after Captain America Civil War as Black Panther, does a fantastic job. You get Killmonger in this film, portrayed perfectly by Michael B. Jordan, who I think is one of the best actors working today in Hollywood. I think he brought a lot to this role. Lupita Nyong'o, I have a big crush on her. She was amazing in this film. It's so cool. It has a lot of sci-fi elements in this film, but it also has a lot of cultural elements in this film. It's celebratory for, the African American community, which I think is so awesome that they are finally represented in a comic book movie like this and of this magnitude. And that's why I think Black Panther is just such a good film. And it's still number 8 on my list, but I love this movie. Number 7, Captain America Civil War. Civil War came out as well when I was on my mission, so the hype and everything kind of went away when I got home. But when I got home and I saw this movie, oh my gosh, was I so happy that this was a movie that I got to experience the way that I experienced it the first time. The first time I watched this film, I watched it with my roommates here in college, and I just absolutely loved the whole battle between Avengers and Avengers pitting off against one another. Team Iron Man, Team Cap. I am a Team Cap person. What are you? List down below. Are you Team Iron Man or Team Cap? But I felt like this was a film that introduced so many new characters. Black Panther, Spider-Man, Ant-Man as well. Even though Ant-Man had his own movie, they still introduced Ant-Man into the Avengers universe. So there was so much to love in this movie that I was in awe when I was watching. I could not believe a movie like this existed. The airport sequence is probably one of the best sequences in action films today. It's so good and it stands up on its own. There is so much to love. This is Avengers 2.5 and Captain America Civil War is great. It's great. Number 6, Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know if I just have a special love for this movie because I saw it. It was the last movie that I saw before I served a 2-year mission in El Salvador. But there was something about this movie that was so different, so unique. It finally brought 2 of my favorite things together in the MCU, sci-fi and action, which action was already in the MCU, but it brought that sci-fi element that I've always wanted. This movie feels like a Star Wars film, but not a Star Wars film. Chris Pratt, perfect casting as Star-Lord. Zoe Saldana, who's fantastic. Dave Bautista, who knew he could act? I didn't. Karen Gillan as Nebula. There's so much to love in this film. You get Rocket, you get Groot, you get all these characters that just are misfits. These are misfits within the MCU that come together, band together, they're one family, and they are the Guardians of the freaking Galaxy. And this is one of those movies that, to me, blew my socks off when I watched it because it actually had a very good villain. I think Ronan the Accuser is a good villain. He's menacing. He's not one of the better villains in the MCU, but I think he's a solid villain. Lee Pace does a very good job as Ronan, honing this performance in and making this feel like it's a grand movie, more grand than what it actually is. You get a lot of world building. You get to see the entire galaxy within the MCU, which is so beautiful to look at. James Gunn did a fantastic job. The soundtrack is my favorite soundtrack in any MCU film, especially when it opens with Come and Get Your Love. Oh, so good. What is not to love about Guardians of the Galaxy? This is a movie that is absolutely fantastic. I could watch this any day of the week and just continue to laugh and have fun with it because it's that type of movie. All right, top 5. Here we go. Are you guys ready? I am. Number 5, Thor Ragnarok. Talk about another cosmic film within the MCU. Thor Ragnarok was just that. This is the best Thor movie we've ever got. This was the best rendition of Thor. I love so many elements of this film. I love the relationship that is built between Thor and Loki, where finally they're getting along, they're siblings, everything looks fine in the MCU. You get Thor with his witty comedy. You get a fantastic villain in Hela, which I think she brings a lot to the table. She was probably the best villain up until Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War. There is so much to love about this film. It feels grand scale. You get a very bizarre Grand Master in this film. So you get a Hulk and Thor fight, which I've wanted to see forever. The two strongest Avengers going at it. You get Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, who's introduced. So there's so many things to love about Thor Ragnarok, and it is one of my favorite films in the MCU. Number 4, Avengers. Avengers, oh my gosh, was this movie everything that I wanted. This is the movie that really defined what a comic book movie is to me when I saw it, because this has everything that I read in comics. It has all these characters: Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Hulk, all these characters coming together facing one enemy, which is Loki. I loved this film. Absolutely loved it. It has amazing humor. One of the best lines, "Puny God" by Hulk, is amazing. You get the Hulk that I want, the menacing Hulk, but also the fun Hulk. You get Mark Ruffalo, who does a great job playing Bruce Banner in this movie. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, who brings a lot to this film. There's so much to love about it. You get, Captain America coming to the modern world, getting kind of blown away by everything that he's saying because he's 70 years into the future. Amazing film. That's why Avengers is number 4 for me. Number 3, here we go. Top 3, Avengers Endgame. I love Endgame. I've seen it 3 times in the theaters. I probably have one more showing in me. There is so much to love about this film. That third act is probably my favorite third act of any movie ever. However, the first 2 acts drag a little bit. It is a little slow. As well, they do certain things with a couple characters that I'm not very happy about, nor do I technically agree with what they did, but they did such a great job in wrapping the ribbon around the whole MCU franchise to this point. A great conclusion for some of our favorite heroes and a great new chapter for others. And I just felt like this is a movie that redefined everything you know about comic book movies, and it gave you anything you have ever wanted if you are a geek like me. Now my top 2. Number 2, Avengers Infinity War. I love Infinity War. Thanos brought everything to the table. This is the best version of Thanos that you will see in the MCU. He's the best villain by far in the MCU. And I also loved what they did with having our heroes lose. It was such a risk that they took, but I absolutely loved it. I loved the journey getting there. I felt like this movie flew by. It did not feel like 2 hours and 40 minutes whatsoever. And this is a movie that takes a bold direction moving forward into the MCU, as opposed to just moving backwards or staying stagnant. It is one of those films that redefined everything to the MCU up until this point, until Endgame, of course. But there's so much to love about this film. You get Captain America with a nice beard. You finally get character interactions you've wanted forever with Doctor Strange and Tony Stark, or whether it be Thor with the Guardians of the Galaxy. So much to love about this film. All right, and my number 1, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I still love this film. I had to really think about it because Avengers Endgame, when I first got out of it, I was like, this might be my favorite. But then I had to kind of come down from that high that I was feeling. And I just had to really look at both films, compare them, and also compare that with Infinity War. And I still think Captain America Winter Soldier is the best film in the MCU. It's a political thriller within the MCU. The Russo brothers, with their first MCU installation, they do such a great job. That has some of my favorite action sequences, especially Cap in the elevator, taking out all those Hydra men. I think that is so cool. I also really loved that Winter Soldier and Captain America, 2 friends from the past who have to fight each other now in the present day. I loved the way that they respected those characters from the beginning. I loved what they did with Captain America moving forward. And I also really liked Black Widow's part in this film. I felt like what she brought to the table escalated the movie that much more further. And for me, it is one of those films that I could just watch any day, every day, and it would never get old to me. And it has some of the best dialogue, it has some of the best sequences, and it to me holds up better than any of the MCU films to date. So anyway, guys, that is my official ranking of the MCU. Again, let me know your thoughts below on my list, and let me also know your ranking below. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to my channel for more content just like this, and I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.